And so this talk is going to cover kind of interaction between AOSP and Android, their workflows, and sort of basically tries to answer a number of questions that I've been given over the last year or so that kind of need some diagrams to describe. So first of all, I really don't have any internal knowledge on how this really works. I have some secondhand rumors, but the diagrams in this presentation are really simple models to help people understand how it works, at least from an outsider's view. I'm sure folks at Google could clarify a lot of more complexity. So this is very much kind of like the Thompson's model that Adam, it's not going to help you understand quantum mechanics. It's just there to kind of help you understand the basics. So up here at the top of the screen, the diagrams, we're going to be focusing on the internal Android repos at Google. These are all very product focused. They're focused on making that phone every year. And then down at the bottom, we'll have the AOSP kind of community focused repos that are public. So here's kind of the basic diagram. We have down here the AOSP master branch. This is basically the trunk of the tree. This is open year-round. Community, it's public. External development can be done at any time. Folks can submit to Garrett. We even have cases where external contributor or external developers even have commit access in some cases. And then basically once a year, or I guess at the beginning of the year, Google will break off and start doing their private development on the next release of Android. And they do a whole bunch of internal development. Finally get something that they feel is stable enough, and then kind of tag it for release. That then gets merged into AOSP master. More development will be done, and then that will get merged into master. And then basically, the whole cycle will repeat again for another release. Now there are a couple of cases where there's teams who do their development directly on AOSP master. And so they work against this tree, and then pull those changes into the release tree. This does require a fair amount of extra work on their parts. We really love these teams. It's great because we can kind of follow along externally, but they're rare. And so it's just, this is sort of the standard model where people are not, Google developers are at least not always working on AOSP master. There are some cases where you'll see changes from the internal trees come out to AOSP master. Basically, Google doesn't want the two branches to diverge too badly, so sometimes on some of the things they're working on, they want to get that pushed back into AOSP master. But for the most part, it's until the tag is merged in, we don't see a lot of those changes. So sort of the first issue I wanted to kind of cover that causes a lot of confusion are the release tags versus AOSP master. So last year, as an example, we had kind of in the, I guess, I'm not sure exactly, early in the year, Google kind of forked off AOSP and started their O development tree. And they did all that private development. Then in April, we finally got HKG18-412 support merged into AOSP. And so lots of excitement, lots of PR and whatever that went out to kind of announce that. It was very exciting. People bought forwards, hurrah. Fast forward a couple months later, I guess it was August, September, the Oreo release came out. The tags were made and pushed out to AOSP master. This is really exciting. All these people jump out. They check out their Android 8.0 release, and then they start to build it for their high keyboard and realize there's not actually any support. It's not a lunch target. And part of the reason for this is that, the tags are made on the internal branch and then pushed in. And so if you basically pulled AOSP master here, you would get the merger of the Android tree and all the development there. And so that would have support for the high keyboard, or the HKG18-412 board. But just at least the 8.0 tag didn't. And so this was very surprising, and lots of people were asking questions about this. And so basically, the work that goes on in AOSP master while that private development stuff is really going to show up in the next release. In this case, the HKG18-412 was pulled in because when they did the 8.1 tree, they again pulled up for AOSP master to do that tree. When folks are doing development against AOSP master, we do have to kind of think that this is potentially work that is a year ahead of going into the next release.
So the next kind of issue of confusion that we've seen is around.
Do you have a quick question?
Oh, yep, sure.
Do you remember the gap, the length of time between when the HKG18-412 support merged and the like 80R1 tag that you saw, where it was?
So I feel like this was April, and that I think was September. It may have been early or late August.
Okay.
And then when the MR1 came out with 8.1, that's where they pulled again from mainline or from the AOSP master, and so it showed up there. But it was, there was a fairly big gap of time there. But yeah, so does that answer it? Next question?
So I think it showed up on 810 for some release tags and then it disappeared again.
Oh yeah, there's an aspect to some of the release tags that sometimes they have. This is the internal complexity. This is the quantum mechanics of it. They have multiple branches per device, and so in some cases, when they release a tag, the tag is for a specific device. So you'll see some features show up in one tag and then disappear in the next tag and show up again because it's whichever one is starting. I honestly, this is where I don't have enough depth to answer questions there, but that's a very complex subtlety. So yes.
It's Schrödinger tag.
Yeah. So on deadboard testing, which is kind of the next aspect that is causing some confusion. So for AOSP master, this is all available publicly. So Linaro can do regular, builds and testing against it. And so we're doing that kind of all the time. We have nightly builds going on, and we do fairly regular testing. But things do break. Sometimes the changes that are being made either by the community or some of those changes that are getting pulled down from the development tree will cause something to break. And hopefully we were able to kind of quickly catch it and fix it up fairly fast, but it does happen probably more often than the chart here shows. But now on the internal trees, basically, they're focused on phones, not on deadboards there. And so it's one of those things where, Dimitri is a kind soul, and he goes off and occasionally takes some time to test the internal branches against the high keyboard. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, he has to kind of go begging and pleading to see who might know what the regression was, and maybe if we can get that fixed or if that makes sense. And sometimes that stuff can be done, but quite often when those tags are made, it's not really working well on the dev boards. And that's just because internally there's not a lot of testing going on there, just because they're product focused. This has kind of a secondary side effect of when those changes land into AOSP master. There's about a week of chaos where we're trying to fix things up and make things go again. And this is kind of rough because, folks who hear about the release, they're excited about the release, they want to go grab those tags. And even I know Yanquin puts a ton of work in the LCR builds, which start with these tags, and then he tries to backport all these fixes that we make here, or even pull fixes that came in through up here, up into that tree. To make those go. But it's a lot of work to get that done. And meanwhile, down here, we're not really sure if we're going to run into any trouble spots. So it's sort of the situation that, I don't know if people are dog owners or not, but you have this sort of aspect of the trustworthy and reliable incontinence of an old dog versus the chaos and craziness of puppies. And neither are really ideal. It's one of those things where you kind of want something kind of in between. So one of the things we've been working on just very recently to try to help here is this idea of known good manifests. So inside Linaro, we do, again, daily builds, and just part of a good hygiene, we create these pin manifests. And this allows folks to recreate the builds that have been built internally. And separately from that, I usually do hands-on testing on the boards. I'll do a repo sync, build everything, make sure everything's really working well. Try to chase down any bugs if they aren't. And to some extent, we're trying to combine these two efforts. And so basically now, instead of me just doing a repo sync and testing what I have on my tree, I can make use of the nightly builds, which have these pin manifests that allow others to reproduce them. And I can basically run through my tests, make sure everything's looking good, there's no performance issues, that sort of thing that are very obvious. And then I can kind of say, okay, this is good, and bless that manifest as being a known good point. And hopefully with this, it kind of allows folks to do more AOSP master development, but kind of avoid the stability pitfalls that we sometimes see. If you want to find this, this is up at GitHub here, 96 boards, AOSP known good manifests. There's some instructions on how to use the manifest to swap back, ideally you don't want to be running the manifest forever, so swapping back to AOSP master is fairly easy with them. And then as far as things that I hope to evolve with it, it's been somewhat new. We had 2 weeks of conferences here and a regression last week, so the last known good manifest is a little stale at this point. I'd hope to have kind of a weekly update for the cadence there. But what I'm excited about is that in the past, when I was doing my development, I'm doing this testing along with kind of keeping my development trees up to date with the latest AOSP master. And so I'd often run into the case where I do a repo sync and end up with a broken build or something just wrong, and then I'm sort of stuck because there was no easy way to even remember where I was because I wasn't necessarily keeping track of that. And so with this, we now have a real easy way to kind of get back to a known good point. But we also have kind of two manifests that they have this repo diff manifest tool. And this will allow us kind of to narrow down. And so we need to start doing things like bisecting to help find out what caused the regression a lot faster. So I'm excited about this and trying to figure out how to improve some tooling to improve that ability to bisect down. Some other aspects is that since we do these daily builds, that's done a lot for the LKFT work, and so they're doing validation on those builds. But it would be nice to be able to kind of pull in those signals into whether or not we decide to bless a manifest as being good. And then kind of a further stretch goal there would be maybe if we can extend LKFT a little bit, we might be able to do some of the manual HDMI and Bluetooth all peripheral validation that I do automatically, and that way we can maybe even get to the close where this could be an automated process. I'm a little skeptical because I feel like a lot of the subtle bugs kind of have to be hands-on for a lot of the cases, but it's something I think we should be looking at. Other ideas I definitely would want input on, so let me grab me later if you have any thoughts. So the last thing I want to cover on this talk is the merge window. So in the upstream kernel community, we have this concept of a merge window. I think probably most folks are familiar with it, but just in case. Basically, after a kernel release is made, there's a 2-week window where new features and functionality can be added. After that 2 weeks, the merge window closes, and for the next 6 to 8 weeks, it's stability fixes only. So basically, you can only just fix up things that are repressed, or no new functionality allowed. In AOSP, there isn't really any sense of this. There's, the tree's open all the time. You can submit things to Garrett at any time. But we've run into a couple of cases where developers have come up with, fairly large changes to AOSP that make substantial kind of change in how things work. And they spend a number of months developing and polishing, and then they get ready to submit it upstream. And they get it upstream, and we start getting folks trying to get folks to review it and see if it can be merged. And sometimes we get told things like, not this year, and that can be kind of devastating if you're thinking like, you spent all this time on it, now you've got 6 to 9 months before it's going to be really looked at. And so to some extent, there is a merge window for more complicated changes. There's times where maybe it's a little easier for Android developers to be able to have some time to review and think about things that are fairly complicated, or that maybe they wouldn't want their internal builds to diverge too much from master on. It seems to be kind of shortly after these tags are made and before they branch off for their next tree. This is sort of the window of time. I guess for the folks in the northern hemisphere, sorry for my assumptions there, it does sort of follow kind of, I would guess, probably traditionally kind of early mid-fall to early winter. But yeah, so that's just something I kind of wanted to let people be aware of and try to figure out, how we can kind of address this. Ideas I'm thinking about is just kind of as a community, can this merge window concept be maybe a little more formalized or at least documented in some way? Because I think it is one of those things, there's a time when the Android developers do, they get a release out, they can go on vacation, they can have a little bit of time to think, and that's sort of the time where, having more complicated things land might be easier. So I just want to make sure that other developers don't get surprised in the way that we have it sometimes. As far as other areas that we might, as a community, be able to improve AOSP, I definitely, your all's input on this as well, but just, I'm trying to think of things like ways of improving just general stability of the AOSP master. If there's some way that we at Linaro maybe could do something like, watch Garrett and as new commits show up, try to do some pre-submit testing for boards basically. So similar to what Google already does with Tree Hunter, but maybe more board-specific testing. I know it's going to be tough. So just something to kind of start thinking about as far as what we might be able to do. And other sort of ideas is kind of, can we find ways to get more participation and interest on AOSP master and getting more people doing testing on that kind of tip of the tree? Because as long as all the vendors are kind of focused on their, just the stable releases, AOSP master, I guess, doesn't get the amount of collaboration and shared testing and all that goes on against masters is more limited. So I think that we can kind of improve the importance and focus of AOSP master rather than being just a bunch of Lego blocks that you can kind of assemble to be something that is kind of folks are more confident and used to base their work on. And I think that's it. So if anybody has any input or whatever, we've got a couple few minutes. Go.
More of a note to some extent. There's a real tendency in the people consuming ASP on Nike 960 to want to take 8.1 for known stable reasons. And you did mention that it had been merged in, but it was not in a state when it merged in to have accelerated graphics. So 8.1 is still not something you want to build for Nike 960 for any engineering purpose.
That's where Yanquin has done a lot of work to try to do that, but that's often LCR and that's not really in ASP properly. And so it is tough. AOSP master is the only branch that is really supported for dev boards.
And I said that no working manifests, that's a real awesome thing for me to go, look at that.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to address there, is to say, okay, this is the branch that's supported, we'll have certain snapshots on that branch basically that people can know are good.
Yeah.
And to some definition of known good, it's one of those things where I can't promise that it's 100%, the amount of validation is somewhat limited, but at least the really obvious terrible stuff will be hopefully avoided.
Currently, the primary kind of communication channel or interaction is through Garrett. So submit a patch and get a bit of review. So thinking kind of, is there any chance we can get something like kernel development? People can have the mail list and know who is the maintainer of these components are, so people can talk with them and, for example, constantly have an idea for what kind of improvement we can have. So instead of waiting for like several months for a big release, and also Android is open source, but to some extent it's a little different from the way kernel development is open sourced. Lots of things still keep behind the doors until there's a formal release and announcement. We know exactly what the next feature is. So I'm not sure how these things can be done more better openly and more communication channel can have.
So in previous years we've had kind of similar discussions, and I know that the Google developers are always like, I feel like their intent is to try to make it so that people can submit and folks will review and stuff goes up, and if something's sitting there for a long time, make sure you let them know, because they really don't intend to be neglecting submissions. One of the things that we've talked about a lot inside of Linaro is trying to build up a sense of not maintainers but co-maintainers, or the idea of having folks who are interested in specific topics and who can go in and do additional review and try to help kind of offload some of that work, because when folks are doing it's getting close to crunch time on a product, like the amount of free time they have to go review whatever crazy idea somebody's submitting is going to be somewhat limited. And so it's one of those things we've talked about, and I think it would be a good idea. I think it is still hard because all of us have our own things to do, and even just across all of open source, I think there's kind of a maintainer deficit, and we don't really have a great way of managing it and having I don't know, it's tough to figure out how to pay people to do things that maybe the people pay them don't really care about. And so it's I don't know, that's something that I think would be useful. I don't want to speak for Google, but I think they've been open to it in some cases where we do have stuff where some of the ARM developers at Linaro have commit access on art, and so it's one of those things where they have kind of offloaded some maintainership to external entities, and so we could try to broaden that. I think that would be great. That is going to take a lot of of work still. We have to have folks who really know the subsystems and who are finding ways to collaborate directly with the folks internally to Google to make sure that everybody's agreeing on kind of direction and those sorts of things.
So maybe you can change part of the description, at least for people in the narrow camp. 30% you can welcome AOSP, do more review. There was some discussion like that. Right? People encourage you to welcome more review the AOSP code so that you can more participation and build a kind of the trust of friendship, right? So
yeah, I definitely think that would be a great thing. Although it is, I think AOSP is a mix. There's a lot of projects in there, and so we've got to kind of pick and choose kind of what are the ones that we want to try to focus on. But yeah, I guess I probably should let the next speaker get up because my time's running out. But thank you so much. Appreciate the input.